The marble floor was cold against my face. I could taste blood in my mouth, metallic and sharp. My hands instinctively went to my swollen belly, protecting the life growing inside me even as my own seemed to be ending. Get out. Brandon's voice echoed through the foyer of what used to be our home. I don't want to see your pathetic face ever again. I tried to push myself up, but pain shot through my ribs. 6 months pregnant, and my husband had just shoved me hard enough to send me sprawling. My designer dress, the one he'd bought me for our anniversary just 3 months ago, was torn at the shoulder. There was blood on it now. I didn't know if it was from my split lip or something worse. Brandon, please, I whispered, looking up at the man I'd loved for 8 years, married for 5. The baby? I don't care about that baby. He stood over me, his face twisted with disgust. Did you really think I'd tie myself to you forever? You're pathetic, Natasha. Always have been. Behind him I saw her. Courtney. The 23-year-old assistant from his office. She was wearing my robe, standing in my hallway, looking at me with something between pity and triumph. Her hand rested on her flat stomach in a gesture that made my blood run cold. Brandon, it's freezing outside, Courtney said softly. Maybe just let her get some? Stay out of this, he snapped at her, then turned back to me. You have 5 minutes to get out of my house. Your house. I struggled to my feet, leaning against the wall. Brandon, my inheritance paid for this house. My family's money. Check the deed, sweetheart. His smile was cruel. It's all in my name now. Everything is. The house, the cars, the accounts. You signed it all over 6 months ago, remember? When you were so tired from the pregnancy, so trusting. The room spun. I remembered that day. I'd been so sick with morning sickness, and he'd brought me papers to sign. Just some refinancing, he'd said. Don't worry about the details. That's fraud, I said, my voice shaking. That's illegal. I'll sue you. I'll take everything. With what lawyer? Brandon laughed. With what money? You don't have a dime, Natasha. And by tomorrow, everyone in this city will know you're crazy. That you made up lies about me. Good luck getting anyone to help you. He grabbed my arm and dragged me toward the door. I tried to resist, but I was weak, dizzy, hurting. The December night air hit me like a physical blow when he opened the door. Snow was starting to fall, light flakes that seemed to mock the hell I was falling into. Brandon, I'm pregnant. I screamed. You can't just. Watch me. He shoved me onto the front steps. I stumbled, fell to my knees on the concrete. Pain exploded through my body. And if you come back, I'll call the police. Tell them you're trespassing. Stalking me and my fiancé. Fiancé? The word barely came out. Courtney and I are getting married next month, he said. She's pregnant too. But unlike you, she's going to give me a son. The door slammed shut. I heard the lock click. Through the beveled glass, I watched Brandon pull Courtney into his arms, kissing her in the foyer where we danced at our wedding reception. The lights were warm and golden inside. Out here, the world was nothing but cold and dark and pain. I managed to stand, but my legs wouldn't hold me. I made it to the sidewalk before I collapsed again. The concrete was icy. Snow was falling harder now, soaking through my thin dress. I tried to call for help, but my phone was inside. My purse was inside. Everything was inside. A sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I gasped, curling around my belly. No, 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 please, I whispered to my baby. Please hold on. Please stay with me. The street was empty. This was an exclusive neighborhood, the kind where people minded their own business. Where houses sat back from the road behind tall gates and manicured hedges. No one was going to help me. No one was going to save me. Blood was seeping through my dress now. I could feel the wetness warm against my cold skin. I was bleeding. The baby. Oh God, the baby. Help! I tried to call out, but my voice was too weak. Somebody help me. The snow kept falling. The world started to blur at the edges. I thought about my mother, who died when I was 12. About my father, who'd passed 2 years ago, leaving me the inheritance that Brandon had stolen. They'd loved me so much. Protected me. And I'd been stupid enough to trust a man who'd thrown me away like garbage. My eyes were closing. The cold didn't hurt anymore. Nothing hurt anymore. Maybe this was better. Maybe it was easier to just let go. To stop fighting. I'm sorry, baby, I whispered to my unborn daughter. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. The darkness was pulling me under. I could hear a car in the distance, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. Brandon had taken everything. My home, my money, my dignity, my future. I had nothing left. I was nothing. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness took me was the snow, pure and white, covering me like a burial shroud. and I wondered if anyone would even notice when we were gone. Miss? Miss, can you hear me? The voice seemed to come from very far away. I felt hands on my shoulders, gentle but urgent. Someone was touching my neck, checking for a pulse. Oh God, she's barely breathing. And she's pregnant. Miss, stay with me. I forced my eyes open. The world was blurry, but I could make out a face above me. An older black man, maybe 45, with kind eyes and deep worry lines creasing his forehead. He was wearing a janitor's uniform under a thin jacket. That's it, stay awake, he said. I'm Jerome. I'm going to help you, okay? Can you tell me what happened? I tried to speak, but only a whimper came out. The pain in my abdomen was getting worse. I felt Jerome's hand move to my belly, then pull back quickly. You're bleeding, he said. We need to get you to a hospital. Right now. He looked around the empty street, then back at me. I could see him making calculations, worry fighting with determination on his face. Then he seemed to make a decision. He shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around me, then carefully, so carefully, lifted me into his arms. I got you, he said. You're going to be okay. You and your baby, you're both going to be okay. He carried me to the corner, moving as fast as he could without jostling me. I could feel how thin he was under his uniform, could see the worn fabric of his clothes. But his arms were strong, steady. He held me like I was precious. A taxi appeared, and Jerome flagged it down with one hand while holding me with the other. Emergency, he called to the driver. She's pregnant and bleeding. We need to get to Memorial Hospital. I ain't taking no bleeding woman in my cab, the driver started to say. I'll pay extra, Jerome said quickly. I'll pay for cleaning, everything. Please, she might be losing her baby. Something in his voice must have reached the driver because he unlocked the doors. Jerome slid into the back seat with me still in his arms, cradling me against his chest. It's okay, he kept saying as the taxi sped through the snowy streets. You're going to be okay. Just breathe. In and out. That's it. I tried to focus on his voice, on the rhythm of his breathing. He smelled like cleaning supplies and coffee. His uniform shirt had a name tag, Jerome Washington, Pacific Tower Maintenance. The building where Brandon's company had offices. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't dying. What's your name? Jerome asked softly. Natasha, I managed to whisper. Natasha. That's a beautiful name. You're doing great, Natasha. We're almost there. At the hospital, Jerome carried me straight to the emergency room entrance. I need help, he shouted. She's pregnant and bleeding. Nurses rushed over with a wheelchair. They tried to take me from Jerome's arms, but I found myself clinging to his shirt. He was the only solid thing in a world that had turned into chaos. I'll be right here, Jerome promised, gently loosening my grip. I'm not going anywhere. They wheeled me into a trauma bay. Doctors and nurses swarmed around me, asking questions I couldn't answer. I heard medical terms I didn't understand. Monitors were beeping. Someone was putting in my arm. Is the father here? A nurse asked. No, Jerome's voice came from somewhere nearby. I found her on the street. We need information. Insurance next of kin? Just save her. Jerome's voice rose, protective and fierce. Save her and the baby. I'll figure out the rest. Time became strange after that. I faded in and out. I heard fragments of conversation. Placental abruption. Need to monitor. Baby's heartbeat is strong. We might need emergency surgery. Hands kept touching my belly. Monitors kept beeping. And through it all, I heard Jerome's voice, steady and calm, telling me to hold on. When I woke up, the room was dim. An ultrasound machine sat nearby, dark and silent. I was in a hospital bed, hooked up to multiple monitors. My hand went immediately to my stomach. The baby's okay. Jerome was sitting in a chair beside my bed, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. The doctor stopped the bleeding. They said you need to stay on bed rest, but your baby girl is strong. She's fighting just like her mama. Tears streamed down my face. She's okay? Really? Really? Jerome smiled, and it transformed his entire face. The doctor will be in soon to explain everything. But Natasha, you're both going to be fine. I looked at this stranger who had saved my life. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you so much. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Jerome shook his head. You don't owe me anything. I just did what any decent person would do. But we both knew that wasn't true. Brandon had thrown me out to die. My friends, my neighbors, the people who'd smiled at me at parties and charity events, none of them had stopped to help. Only this janitor, this man who probably made minimum wage, had put himself out for a stranger. The taxi fare, I said suddenly. The hospital bills. I don't have any money. My husband, he took everything. Don't worry about that right now. Jerome's voice was gentle but firm. The taxi cost $43. I used my grocery money for this week. The hospital is billing me for your care since you don't have insurance information on file. I set up a payment plan. Horror washed over me. No, you can't. You shouldn't have to pay for. Natasha, stop. Jerome leaned forward, his eyes serious. What happened to you tonight was wrong. Someone hurt you bad. But you're here now and you're alive and your baby is alive. That's all that matters. But your grocery money? I'll figure it out. I always do. He smiled again, trying to lighten the mood. Besides, I could stand to lose a few pounds anyway. It wasn't funny, but I found myself laughing anyway, a broken, desperate sound that turned into sobs. Jerome didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, patient and kind, while I cried for everything I'd lost. When I finally stopped, he handed me a tissue from the bedside table. The doctor said you can be discharged tomorrow if you have somewhere to go. Somewhere safe. Do you have family? Friends who can help? I shook my head. My mother was dead. My father was dead. My friends were all Brandon's friends, people who moved in his circles, who'd believe whatever story he told about me. I have nowhere, I admitted. Nothing. He took it all. Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. I have a small apartment. Just one room, really. It's not much. But you and your baby need somewhere warm and safe. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask. I'm offering. He met my eyes. Natasha, I don't know what happened tonight, not all of it. But I know you were left for dead on a freezing street while pregnant. Nobody deserves that. Nobody. And I'm not going to send you back out into the cold. But you don't know me, I protested. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. I could rob you. Could you? Jerome raised an eyebrow. Despite everything, I almost smiled. No. Then it settled. When you get discharged, you come stay with me. Just until you get back on your feet. Figure out your next move. No pressure, no expectations. Just a warm, safe place to heal. I looked at this man who had given me his grocery money, taken on my medical bills, and was now offering me his home. A complete stranger. A janitor who had less than nothing. And I realized I was seeing something Brandon had never had, no matter how much money he'd stolen. A good heart. Okay, I whispered. Thank you, Jerome. Thank you for saving my life. Thank me by taking care of yourself and that baby, he said. Now get some rest. I'll be right here if you need anything. I closed my eyes, feeling safe for the first time in hours. The monitors beeped steadily beside me. My baby moved inside me, a gentle flutter that meant she was alive. We were both alive. And somehow, despite losing everything, I felt the tiniest spark of something I thought was dead. Hope. Jerome's apartment was exactly what he'd said. One room. When I walked in 2 days later, supported by Jerome's arm because I was still weak, I saw everything at once. A single bed against one wall, neatly made with a thin blanket. A small table with 2 mismatched chairs. A hot plate and mini fridge that served as a kitchen. A bathroom barely bigger than a closet. But it was clean. Spotless, actually. And warm. And it smelled like pine sol and fresh air instead of blood and snow and betrayal. I know it's not what you're used to, Jerome said quietly. He sounded almost apologetic. But the building's safe and the heat works good. I looked around the tiny space that was smaller than my old walk-in closet. The space where this kind man was giving up his privacy, his comfort, maybe even his bed for a stranger. And I started crying again. Hey now, Jerome said, alarmed. If it's really that bad, we can find somewhere else. It's perfect, I interrupted, wiping my eyes. It's the most beautiful place I've ever seen. Jerome didn't understand. How could he? He didn't know about the marble floors and crystal chandeliers I'd left behind. The rooms so big your voice echoed in them. The luxury that had meant nothing when the man I loved had thrown me away like trash. This tiny room with its thin walls and worn furniture was worth more than all of Brandon's stolen wealth because it was offered with kindness. Jerome had bought me clothes from the thrift store. Simple things, sweatpants and oversized shirts that would fit over my pregnant belly. He'd also picked up prenatal vitamins using money I knew he didn't have. You take the bed, he insisted. I'll sleep on the floor. I got extra blankets. Absolutely not. I tried to sound firm, but I was so tired. This is your home. You've done enough. More than enough. We argued about it for a while, but I was too exhausted to fight properly. Eventually, Jerome laid out blankets on the floor and insisted he'd slept in worse places. I wanted to argue more, but my body had other ideas. I fell asleep almost the moment my head touched his pillow. When I woke up, it was dark outside. Jerome was sitting at the small table, reading a book under the light of a single lamp. He must have heard me stirring because he looked up and smiled. "There's soup on the hot plate if you're hungry," he said. "Chicken noodle. Nothing fancy, but it's warm." My stomach growled in response. Jerome ladled out a bowl and brought it to me. It was canned soup, cheap and basic. It tasted like the best meal I'd ever had. "Thank you," I said between bites. "For everything. I keep saying it, but I don't know what else to say." "You don't have to keep thanking me." Jerome settled back into his chair. "But if you want to talk about what happened, I'm a good listener." So I told him. Everything. How I'd met Brandon at a charity gala, how charming he'd been. Our whirlwind romance and quick marriage. How my father had died and left me everything. His company, his investments, his properties. How I'd trusted Brandon completely when he suggested consolidating our assets. How I'd signed papers while sick with pregnancy, never imagining he'd been planning this betrayal for months. Jerome listened without interrupting, his face growing darker as the story unfolded. "And when I found out I was pregnant," I continued, "Brandon seemed so happy. He threw a party. Bought me gifts. I thought we were building a family." I laughed bitterly. "I was so stupid." "You weren't stupid," Jerome said firmly. "You trusted someone you loved. That's not stupid. That's human." "But he stole everything," I whispered. "My inheritance, my father's company, my home. All of it. And now he's with Courtney and they're getting married, and everyone thinks I'm crazy if I try to say anything." I pulled out the discharge papers from the hospital. "I called 2 lawyer friends yesterday. They both said they couldn't help me. One was too busy. The other said he didn't want to get involved in a domestic dispute. They're protecting Brandon because he's powerful and connected, and I'm just nothing." Jerome was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're not nothing, Natasha. You survived. You're here. You and your baby are alive. That's not nothing." "But what do I do now?" I looked around the tiny apartment. "I have no money. No ID, it was all in my purse inside the house. No job. I'm 6 months pregnant with nowhere to go. How do I fight someone who took everything?" "I don't know," Jerome admitted. "But we'll figure it out. One step at a time." I looked at him. "Jerome, you've already done so much. You don't have to." "I know I don't have to." He met my eyes. "But I'm going to anyway. Because what happened to you is wrong. And because—" He hesitated, then continued, "because I know what it's like to have nothing. To feel like the world just pushed you down and kicked you while you were there." I waited, sensing there was more. "I used to teach," Jerome said quietly. "Math at a high school in the inner city. I loved it. I was good at it. But then my wife got sick. Cancer. The bills piled up fast. We lost our house, our savings, everything. And when she died, I couldn't go back to teaching. Couldn't focus. Lost my license for missing too many days." "I'm so sorry," I said softly. He shrugged. "It's been 5 years now. I got the janitorial job because it was all I could find without references, without a teaching license. But here's what I learned. Rock bottom is only the end if you stop there. You can also use it as a foundation to build something new." His words settled into my chest, taking root. Rock bottom. That's where I was. But maybe, just maybe, he was right. Maybe I could build from here. "I need to get my documents," I said slowly, thinking out loud. "Birth certificate, social security card. I can't get a job without ID." "The county records office can help with that," Jerome said. "I had to replace my papers after a fire in my old apartment. It takes some time, but it's doable. And I need to find out exactly what Brandon did legally. There has to be some kind of paper trail. Some way to prove he forged my signature or manipulated me." "The library has free computers," Jerome offered. "And legal databases you can access." I looked at him in surprise. "How do you know that?" "I read a lot." He gestured to the bookshelf I'd noticed earlier. It was crammed with books, fiction, non-fiction, textbooks. Never went to college, but I like learning. The library is like my university. An idea began forming in my mind. "Jerome, do you have your high school diploma?" He looked down at his hands. "No. I dropped out at 16 to help my mom when my dad left. Always meant to go back, but—" "What if we helped each other?" I said. "You're letting me stay here, feeding me, keeping me safe. What if I helped you study for your GED? I have an MBA, or I did before I left school to marry Brandon. I could tutor you." Jerome's eyes lit up for a moment, then dimmed. "Natasha, You're pregnant and dealing with your own problems. You don't need to. I need to do something, I interrupted. I need to feel useful instead of just helpless. And you're brilliant, Jerome. I can tell. You just never had the chance to prove it. He studied me for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. Okay. If you're sure. I'm sure. I felt a small surge of purpose. Tomorrow we start. You study for your GED and I start figuring out how to get my life back. That night, lying in Jerome's bed while he slept on the floor he insisted was comfortable, I thought about Brandon. About Courtney. About everything they'd taken from me. The anger was there, hot and sharp. But underneath it was something else. Determination. They thought they'd destroyed me. Thought they could throw me away and I'd just disappear. But I was still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. And I was going to make them regret underestimating Natasha Coleman. Not with violence. Not with screaming or scenes. But with patience. With strategy. With the cold, calculated precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. Brandon had taught me one valuable lesson. Trust no one. But Jerome had taught me something else. Sometimes the people with the least give the most. I was going to rebuild. Not just my life, but something better than what I'd had before. Something real. Something earned. And when I did, Brandon would finally understand what he'd thrown away. The county records office was a gray building that smelled like old paper and bureaucracy. I'd been here for 3 hours, moving from one line to another, filling out forms to replace my birth certificate and social security card. 4 to 6 weeks processing time, the clerk told me, stamping my application with the kind of boredom that comes from saying the same thing 1,000 times. Is there any way to expedite it? I asked. I need to find work and I can't without ID. She looked at me over her glasses, taking in my thrift store clothes and pregnant belly. Are you in immediate danger? Do you have a court order? No, but... Then 4 to 6 weeks. She called for the next person in line. I left the building fighting back tears of frustration. Everything took time. Everything required money I didn't have or documents I was waiting for or proof of things I couldn't prove. The system was designed for people who already had resources, not people trying to climb out of nothing. Jerome was waiting outside, having taken time off work to come with me. He worked the night shift as a janitor and should have been sleeping, but he'd insisted on accompanying me. Any luck? He asked. 4 to 6 weeks, I said. For papers I used to have. Papers that were mine. It's progress, Jerome said gently. A month and a half from now you'll have what you need. He was right, but it felt like forever. A month and a half of depending on Jerome's kindness. Of watching him work himself to exhaustion to feed 2 people instead of 1. Of seeing him give up his bed, his space, his peace for a stranger. We walked to the library where I'd been spending most of my days. The computers were free, and the librarians had stopped giving me suspicious looks when I logged hours researching legal cases and financial regulations. Today I was looking into something specific. Forgery laws in our state. What constituted fraud in contract signing. How to prove someone had manipulated you into signing away your assets. The problem was I'd signed everything. There were my signatures on every document Brandon had filed. Witness signatures. Notarized signatures. On paper it all looked legitimate. But I knew the truth. I'd been 6 months pregnant, sick every morning, exhausted every evening. Brandon had brought me documents when I was barely conscious. Just refinancing, honey. Just some housekeeping. You don't need to read all the details. And I trusted him. I pulled up another legal database, searching for cases where pregnant women had successfully challenged contracts signed under duress. There were some, but they all had one thing in common: expensive lawyers and years of litigation. I didn't have expensive lawyers. I didn't have any lawyers. Natasha. Jerome appeared beside me carrying his GED study books. You okay? You look upset. I gestured at the screen. I'm trying to figure out how to prove Brandon defrauded me, but every path requires resources I don't have. Lawyers who cost hundreds of dollars an hour. Court fees. Years of fighting while he lives in my house and spends my father's money. Jerome sat down in the chair beside me. What if you're thinking about this the wrong way? What do you mean? You're trying to prove he tricked you into signing over your assets. But what if instead you prove what he did with those assets was illegal? I blinked at him. I don't understand. Jerome pulled up a new browser window. You said your father's company was in investments in real estate, right? Brandon took it over when you signed everything to him? Yes. Coleman Investments. My father built it from nothing. So Brandon runs it now. Which means if there's anything illegal happening in that company, fraud, embezzlement, anything, he's responsible. Jerome looked at me. You can't afford to sue him personally. But you might be able to bring attention to what he's doing with the company. Understanding dawned slowly. If the company is investigated for financial crimes, everything would be frozen. His assets, the accounts. And if he stole from your father's company, if he's using it to commit fraud, the government investigates for free. They pay for their own lawyers. I stared at Jerome with new respect. That's brilliant. But I'd need evidence. Proof that he's doing something illegal. You lived with him for 5 years, Jerome pointed out. You must know something about his business. About how he operates. I thought back to all those dinners where Brandon had talked about deals and contracts. To the papers I'd seen on his desk. To conversations I'd overheard when he thought I wasn't listening. And I remembered something. The Highland Project, I said slowly. Brandon was always stressed about it. He'd take calls late at night, get angry, say things didn't add up. He told me it was just construction delays, but... Jerome prompted. But what if it wasn't? What if there was something wrong with the numbers? With the financing? I turned to the computer, typing rapidly. The Highland Project is a commercial real estate development. Brandon's company was the lead investor. I pulled up public records, news articles, building permits. The project had broken ground 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a mixed-use development, offices, retail, luxury apartments. But construction had stalled 6 months ago. The permits were current, but the site sat empty. Where's the money? I murmured. A project that size would have millions in financing. Investor money. If construction stopped, where did that money go? Jerome leaned over my shoulder. Can you find out who the investors are? I searched public filings, SEC records, business registrations. Took an hour, but I found it. A list of investment partners in the Highland Project. Pension funds. Private investors. People who'd trusted their money to Coleman Investments. And the financials didn't match. According to the building permits and contractors, the project should have cost around $40 million. According to the investment disclosures, investors had put in $65 million. $25 million unaccounted for. This is it, I breathed. This is fraud. Brandon raised more money than the project needed, and the extra money just disappeared. Where did it go? Jerome asked. I kept digging, following thread after thread through public records. And then I found something that made my blood run cold. Transfers to offshore accounts. Payments to shell companies. Money moving through layers of legal but suspicious transactions. All signed off by Brandon Coleman, CEO of Coleman Investments. My father's company. My father's name. Being used to steal from innocent people. He's not just a thief, I said quietly. He's a criminal. He stole from me, from my family, and now he's stealing from everyone who trusted him. Jerome squeezed my shoulder. Natasha, this is serious. This is federal crime territory. Securities fraud. If you're right about this. If I'm right, I can bring him down. I looked at Jerome, feeling something fierce and determined rising in my chest. Not through divorce court. Not through lawyers I can't afford. But through the law. Through the system. If I can prove this, the SEC will investigate. The FBI will investigate. But you need evidence, Jerome said. More than just public records that don't add up. You need the actual documents. The internal papers that show where the money went. He was right. And I didn't have access to those documents. They were in Brandon's office in the company I'd been locked out of. Or were they? Jerome, I need to make a phone call. I used the library's phone to call the one person who might help me. Someone who'd known my father. Someone who'd worked for the company before Brandon took over. Helen Martinez answered on the third ring. Hello. Helen, it's Natasha Coleman. Silence. Then, Natasha? Oh my God, we heard you'd lost your mind. That you'd left Brandon and were living on the streets. It's all lies, I interrupted. Helen, Brandon threw me out. He stole everything my father left me. And now he's stealing from the investors. That's a serious accusation, Helen said carefully. I know. And I can prove it. But I need your help. I took a breath. You still have access to the company servers, don't you? Another long silence. Natasha, I could lose my job. Brandon would destroy me. He's destroying innocent people, Helen. People who trusted my father. Their pensions, their savings, he's stealing it all. I paused. My father trusted you. He promoted you when no one else would give you a chance. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Just look at the Highland Project files. The internal reports. the transfer authorizations. And if you see what I think you'll see, send them to me. Anonymously. And if I do this? Helen asked quietly. If I find evidence that Brandon is committing fraud? Then I'll make sure the right people see it. People who can stop him before he hurts anyone else. Helen was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she said, Your father was a good man, Natasha. He'd be sick if he knew what Brandon was doing to his company. I know. Give me 3 days. I'll see what I can find. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, hoping I hadn't just made a terrible mistake. Hoping Helen would come through. Hoping this gamble would pay off. Jerome was watching me when I turned around. You think she'll help? I don't know, I admitted. But it's the only chance I have. We spent the rest of the afternoon in the library. Jerome studied for his GED while I researched SEC regulations and whistleblower protections. When evening came, we walked back to his apartment together, picking up cheap groceries on the way. That night, while Jerome slept on his pile of blankets on the floor, I lay awake thinking about my father. About the company he'd built with integrity and hard work. About how Brandon had perverted everything it stood for. I put my hand on my belly, feeling my baby move. Your grandfather was a good man, I whispered. He taught me that doing the right thing isn't always easy. But it's always worth it. 3 days. That's how long I had to wait to see if Helen would help me. 3 days to see if I had any chance of taking Brandon down. I could wait 3 days. I'd already survived the impossible. The contractions started at 3 in the morning. I woke up with a sharp pain in my lower back, different from the usual pregnancy aches. At first I thought I just slept wrong. But then another pain came, wrapping around my belly like a vice. Jerome, I whispered, trying not to panic. Jerome, wake up. He was on his feet instantly, the instinct of someone used to being alert. What's wrong? I think the baby's coming. We talked about this. I was 7 months along now, having lived in Jerome's tiny apartment for 4 weeks. We'd planned to go to the county hospital when my time came, the one that had to take patients regardless of ability to pay. But I wasn't supposed to be in labor yet. Not for another 2 months. It's too early, I said, fear making my voice shake. Jerome, it's too early. Okay, stay calm. Jerome was already pulling on his shoes, grabbing his jacket. We're going to the hospital. Everything's going to be fine. But I could hear the worry in his voice. The taxi ride was a blur of pain and fear. Jerome held my hand the whole way, murmuring encouragement even though I could see the terror in his eyes. When we got to the emergency room, they rushed me in immediately. Premature labor, the doctor confirmed after examining me. We're going to try to stop it, but if we can't, we need to prepare for an early delivery. They gave me medications. Hooked me up to monitors. My baby's heartbeat filled the room, fast and strong. She's a fighter, the nurse said, smiling. Just like her mama. Jerome stayed by my side through all of it. When the nurses tried to send him to the waiting room, I grabbed his hand and wouldn't let go. He's family, I insisted. He stays. The doctors managed to slow the contractions, but they couldn't stop them completely. 12 hours later, my water broke. Okay, Natasha, Dr. Williams said, a kind black woman with steady hands. We're going to have this baby now. She's small, but she's strong. We have a NICU team ready. I'm scared, I whispered. I know, honey. But you're not alone. She nodded toward Jerome, who looked terrified but determined. Is he the father? No, I said. He's better. He's the person who saved my life. The labor was hard. Painful in ways I'd never imagined. But through every contraction, every push, Jerome was there. He held my hand. He wiped my face with a cool cloth. He told me I was strong, I was brave, I could do this. And when my daughter finally came into the world, tiny and screaming and perfect, Jerome cried. She's beautiful, he whispered, watching the nurses clean her and check her vitals. Natasha, she's absolutely beautiful. They let me hold her for just a moment before taking her to the NICU. She was so small, barely 4 pounds. But she had my eyes. My father's nose. She was alive and fighting. What are you going to name her? Jerome asked. I looked down at my daughter, this tiny miracle who'd survived being thrown out in the cold, who'd held on through stress and fear and poverty. Who'd decided to come early because she was ready to fight this world. Zara, I said. It means princess and blooming flower. Zara Coleman. Not Brandon's name. Just mine. My father's name. The name of a family that had built something good before Brandon corrupted it. Jerome smiled. It's perfect. They took Zara to the NICU after that. I was moved to a recovery room. Jerome went with me even though visiting hours were over, even though he wasn't family. The nurses didn't have the heart to make him leave. You should go home, I told him. Sleep. You have work tonight. I called in sick, Jerome said. I'm not leaving you. But you need the money. Natasha. He took my hand. Stop. Just stop trying to carry everything alone. You have me now. We're in this together. I started crying then. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming gratitude of having someone care. Really care. Not because they wanted something from me, but just because I was a human being who deserved kindness. I don't deserve you, I whispered. Yes, you do, Jerome said firmly. Everyone deserves someone who shows up for them. Everyone. The next few days were a blur. Zara stayed in the NICU, gaining strength. I recovered from the birth, my body slowly healing. And Jerome was there for all of it. He brought me books to read. He smuggled in better food than the hospital served. He sat with Zara when I was too tired, his large, gentle hands touching her tiny fingers through the incubator's openings. She likes you, I observed one afternoon, watching him talk softly to my daughter. She's got good taste, Jerome said, making me smile. When the social worker came to talk about my discharge, Jerome was ready. She and the baby will stay with me, he said before they could ask. I have a safe, clean apartment. I work steady. I'll make sure they have what they need. The social worker looked skeptical. Mr. Washington, a newborn is expensive. Premature babies especially. I know, Jerome interrupted. And we'll manage. Natasha is strong. I'm resourceful. We'll make it work. After the social worker left, I turned to Jerome. You don't have to do this. Taking care of a newborn, the expense, the sleepless nights. I know I don't have to, Jerome said. I want to. Natasha, I've been alone for 5 years. Working, sleeping, existing. You and Zara, you've given me something I forgot I could have. Purpose. Family. We're not your family, I protested weakly. Aren't you? Jerome looked at me seriously. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who show up, who stay, who fight for each other. He paused. You and Zara showed up in my life when I needed you just as much as you needed me. That makes us family. Something shifted in that moment. Something fundamental. I looked at this man who worked as a janitor, who slept on floors, who gave away his grocery money for strangers. And I saw what Brandon had never been. A good man. Not rich. Not powerful. Not connected. Just good. Fundamentally, essentially good. Zara came home a week later, still small but healthy. Jerome had transformed his tiny apartment. He'd bought a bassinet from a yard sale and cleaned it until it gleamed. He'd gotten baby clothes from the thrift store, washed and organized them. He'd used his entire paycheck to stock up on diapers and formula. The first night home, Zara cried every 2 hours. Jerome got up every time, changing her, burping her, rocking her back to sleep. When I protested that I should be the one doing it, he just smiled. You're recovering from childbirth. I'm recovering from nothing. Let me help. As I watched him pace the small room, this tiny baby cradled against his chest, singing softly in a voice rough from exhaustion, something in my heart cracked open. This was what love looked like. Not fancy dinners and expensive gifts. Not grand gestures and passionate declarations. But 3 a.m. diaper changes. Shared grocery money. Someone who showed up, day after day, asking for nothing in return. I thought about Brandon living in my mansion with his young mistress. Spending my father's money. Sleeping in silk sheets while I slept in a stranger's borrowed bed. And I realized something that should have broken me but instead set me free. I was glad he threw me out. Because if he hadn't, I never would have met Jerome. Never would have learned what real goodness looked like. Never would have understood that poverty with kindness was worth more than wealth without character. Brandon thought he'd destroyed me. But he'd actually freed me. And now, holding my daughter while watching Jerome prepare formula with the careful precision of someone who'd learned from YouTube videos, I felt something Brandon never could have given me. 2 days later, Helen's package arrived. Jerome brought it up from the mailbox, a thick manila envelope with no return address. Inside were copies of documents from Coleman Investments, financial statements, transfer authorizations, internal emails, everything I needed to prove Brandon's fraud. I sat on Jerome's bed, Zara sleeping beside me, and read through page after page of evidence. Brandon had stolen from the Highland Project. $25 million siphoned off through shell companies and offshore accounts. Money that belonged to pension funds and small investors. People like Jerome who'd lost everything and were trying to rebuild. This is it, I said quietly. This is enough to bring him down. Jerome looked up from his GED studies. What are you going to do? I thought about my daughter, innocent and perfect. About the kind of world I wanted her to grow up in. About the lesson my father had taught me, do the right thing even when it's hard. I'm going to turn him in, I said. To the SEC, the FBI, anyone who'll listen. He'll know it was you, Jerome warned. He'll come after you. Let him try. I looked down at Zara, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. I'm not scared anymore. I have nothing left for him to take. And everything worth protecting. That night, while Jerome slept and Zara dreamed her baby dreams, I wrote an anonymous email to the Securities and Exchange Commission. I attached every document Helen had sent. I detailed every suspicion, every discrepancy, every theft. And I hit send. The wheels of justice turned slowly. But they turned. And Brandon Coleman had no idea the reckoning that was coming. 3 weeks passed with no response to my anonymous tip. I started to think nothing would happen. That my evidence wasn't enough. That Brandon was too connected, too powerful to touch. But I was wrong. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Jerome had just left for his GED testing. He'd studied every night for weeks and was finally ready, when I saw the headline on the library computer. Coleman Investments under federal investigation for securities fraud. My hands shook as I clicked the article. The SEC had raided Brandon's office. Federal agents had seized documents, computers, files. The investigation was looking into the Highland Project and possible misappropriation of investor funds. I read the article 3 times, making sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I searched for more coverage. Every news outlet in the city was running the story. Some had photos of Brandon being escorted from his office by FBI agents. He looked shocked, terrified, like someone who'd never imagined he could be caught. I sat back in the library chair, Zara sleeping in her carrier beside me, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Vindication. My phone buzzed. I'd gotten a cheap prepaid cell with some of my first paycheck from the accounting temp job I'd started 2 weeks ago. It was Helen. Did you see the news? She asked without preamble. I saw it. They're interviewing everyone at the company. The FBI. They have all the files. Helen's voice dropped. Natasha, they have everything. Brandon's going down. What about you? I asked. Are you okay? I told them I'd been suspicious for months. That I'd reported concerns internally but was ignored. She paused. They believed me. I think I'm going to be fine. After we hung up, I just sat there processing. This was real. This was actually happening. The man who'd thrown me out to die was facing federal charges. But the satisfaction I'd expected to feel was mixed with something else. Worry. Because Brandon wasn't the type to go down quietly. I was right to worry. That night, my old phone, the one I'd left behind when Brandon threw me out, started ringing. I kept the number active using a free app, just to see if Brandon would ever try to contact me. He did. 23 missed calls. 17 text messages. This is your fault, one text read. You did this to me. I know it was you who sent those files to the FBI. You're going to pay for this. Where are you? I need to talk to you. Natasha, please. They're going to arrest me. You have to help me. I blocked his number without responding. He didn't deserve my words. He didn't deserve anything from me. But the messages kept coming from different numbers. From Courtney's phone. From numbers I didn't recognize. My lawyer says if you testify against me, you'll go to jail too. Remember, you signed those documents. You're just as guilty. If I go down, you go down with me. Jerome found me staring at the messages, my hands shaking. What's wrong? I showed him the phone. He read through the text, his face darkening. This is harassment. And it's witness intimidation if they think you're going to testify. I sent the tip anonymously, I said. They don't know it was me for sure. Brandon knows. Jerome sat beside me. Or at least he suspects. And he's panicking. What if he's right? I asked quietly. What if they try to say I was involved in the fraud? I signed documents. My name is on some of those transfers. Under duress. While pregnant and manipulated. Jerome took my hand. Natasha, you're a victim here. Not a criminal. But what if? My phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Natasha Coleman? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Yes. This is Special Agent Rodriguez with the FBI. I'm investigating the Coleman Investments case. I'd like to speak with you about your relationship with Brandon Coleman. My heart stopped. Am I in trouble? No, ma'am. We believe you may be a victim of Mr. Coleman's fraudulent activities. We'd like to take your statement. I met with Agent Rodriguez 2 days later at a federal building downtown. Jerome came with me, holding Zara while I sat across from the agent in a small conference room. Agent Rodriguez was in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a kind smile. Thank you for coming in, Miss Coleman. I know this must be difficult. What do you need from me? I asked. The truth. She opened a folder. We've been investigating Brandon Coleman for 6 months. The anonymous tip we received 3 weeks ago gave us the evidence we needed to move forward. But we need to understand the full scope of his crimes. 6 months? I repeated. You've been investigating him for 6 months? We had suspicions about Coleman Investments for a while. But we couldn't prove anything until we got access to the internal documents. She looked at me carefully. Did you send those documents, Miss Coleman? I thought about lying. About protecting myself. But then I thought about my father. About doing the right thing. Yes, I said. I sent them. Brandon stole my father's company. He stole from me. And he was stealing from innocent investors. I couldn't let him keep doing it. Agent Rodriguez nodded. Can you tell me about your marriage to Mr. Coleman? About how he gained access to your assets? So I told her everything. The whole story from the beginning. How I'd met Brandon, how my father died, how I trusted him completely. How he brought me documents to sign while I was sick with pregnancy. How he'd thrown me out when I was 6 months pregnant and bleeding. Agent Rodriguez took notes, her expression growing darker as the story unfolded. Miss Coleman, I need to ask you something important, she said when I finished. Did you knowingly participate in any of the fraudulent activities at Coleman Investments? No, I said firmly. I didn't even know what Brandon was doing until after he threw me out. I started researching because I was trying to figure out how to prove he'd stolen from me. That's when I found the Highland Project discrepancies. And the documents you obtained, how did you get them? I hesitated. I didn't want to get Helen in trouble. Someone who worked at the company believed me. They looked into the Highland Project and sent me copies of what they found. We'll need to speak with that person. I can't give you their name without permission, I said. They took a huge risk helping me. I won't betray them. Agent Rodriguez studied me for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. You're loyal. I respect that. We can work around it for now. She closed her folder. Miss Coleman, I want to be clear about something. You are not a suspect in this investigation. You're a victim. Brandon Coleman manipulated you, stole from you, and attempted to destroy you. What he did to you was criminal. But I signed the documents. Under false pretenses while in a vulnerable state. Your signature on those papers doesn't make you complicit in his fraud. She leaned forward. We've seen this pattern before. Men who use their wives to legitimize their crimes, then discard them when they're no longer useful. You're not the first, and sadly you won't be the last. Relief flooded through me. So I won't be charged with anything? No. In fact, we'd like you to consider testifying against Mr. Coleman when this goes to trial. Your testimony about how he manipulated you, how he transferred your assets fraudulently, it would be powerful evidence. He's been sending me threatening messages, I said, showing her my phone. Saying if he goes down, I go down with him. Agent Rodriguez's jaw tightened. That's witness intimidation. We'll add it to the charges. She made a note. Miss Coleman, I need you to be prepared. This investigation is going to get bigger. We've found evidence that the Highland Project isn't the only fraud. Brandon Coleman has been running schemes for years. Dozens of victims. Millions of dollars stolen. I thought about all those people who'd trusted my father's company. Who'd believed in the Coleman name. And Brandon had used that trust to rob them. I'll testify, I said. Whatever you need. I want him to face justice for what he did. Agent Rodriguez smiled. Good. We'll be in touch. When I left the federal building, Jerome was waiting outside with Zara. How did it go? I'm not in trouble, I said, feeling lighter than I had in months. And Brandon is. They want me to testify against him. Are you scared? Jerome asked. I thought about it. Was I scared? Brandon had taken everything from me. Humiliated me. Tried to destroy me. But he'd failed. No, I said honestly. I'm not scared anymore. I'm ready. That night, the news reported that Brandon Coleman had been arrested. Bail was set at $2 million. The charges included securities fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Courtney posted bail for him using what was left of his accessible funds. But 2 days later, when his accounts were fully frozen and the FBI seized his assets, she filed for divorce. I saw the filing online. Courtney Preston versus Brandon Coleman. She was claiming she'd been deceived about his financial situation, that she was an innocent victim. I almost laughed. Innocent. The woman who'd knowingly slept with a married man, who'd moved into a house with a pregnant wife's belongings still inside, who'd flaunted her relationship while I fought to survive. But her innocence or guilt didn't matter to me anymore. Brandon was facing justice. That was enough. Jerome passed his GED with a perfect score. When he came home with his certificate, I hugged him tight. "I'm so proud of you," I said. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said, smiling. "You're a great teacher. What are you going to do now?" I asked. Jerome looked at his certificate, then at me and Zara. "I've been thinking about going to community college. They have a program for accounting. With financial aid, I could actually afford it." "Accounting?" I raised an eyebrow. "Well, you made it sound interesting when you were explaining all that fraud stuff to me." He grinned. "Plus, it's a steady career. Good money. I could provide better for my family." My heart squeezed. His family. He meant us. Me and Zara. This man who'd taken us in when we had nothing was claiming us as his family. "Jerome," I said softly, "you don't have to." "I know I don't have to," he interrupted. "But I want to. Natasha, these past 3 months have been the happiest I've been in 5 years. You and Zara, you've brought light back into my life. If you'll let me, I want to keep being part of yours." I looked at this good, kind man. At the cramped apartment that felt more like home than my mansion ever had. At the simple life we'd built from nothing. "We'd be honored," I said, tears in my eyes. That night, I fed Zara her bottle while Jerome studied his community college applications. My temp job had turned into a permanent position. It didn't pay much, but it was honest work. And with Jerome's financial aid and my income, we were starting to save money. Starting to build something real. Brandon's trial was set for 6 months away. I'd have to face him in court. Have to relive everything he'd done to me. But I wouldn't be alone. I had Jerome. I had Zara. I had a future that I was building with my own hands. And that was worth more than anything Brandon had ever stolen. Spring came slowly, turning the city from gray to green. Zara turned 4 months old, growing stronger every day. Her smile could light up a room and she'd started laughing, a sound that made even the hardest days worthwhile. Jerome started community college, taking classes in accounting and business. He still worked nights as a janitor, but he'd cut back to part-time. Between my salary and his financial aid, we were making it work. Barely, but we were making it. We'd moved out of his tiny one-room apartment into a small 2-bedroom place in a working-class neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, the walls were thin and the carpet was old, but it was clean and safe. Zara had her own room, painted yellow with thrift store furniture that Jerome had lovingly restored. I'd been promoted at the accounting firm where I worked. My boss, Mr. Chin, had been impressed with my ability to spot financial irregularities. He didn't know about my connection to the Coleman Investments case. I'd applied under my maiden name, Natasha Lawson, and kept my past private. But everything changed one Tuesday morning when Mr. Chen called me into his office. "Natasha, have a seat," he said, his expression serious. My heart sank. Had he found out about Brandon? Was I being fired? "I received a call yesterday from the SEC," Mr. Chen continued. "They wanted to verify your employment here." I felt sick. "Mr. Chen, I can explain." He held up a hand. "They told me about your involvement in the Coleman Investments case. About how you provided the evidence that broke it open." "I'm sorry I didn't tell you," I said quickly. "I just wanted to start fresh. I didn't want people to know about everything that happened." Mr. Chen was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. "Natasha, I'm not upset. I'm impressed. What you did, exposing fraud at that level despite your personal connection to it, that takes courage. And skill." I blinked. "You're not firing me?" "Firing you? No. I'm offering you a promotion." He slid a folder across the desk. "I want you to head up a new division. Forensic accounting. We've had several clients ask if we can help them investigate potential fraud in their own companies. You'd be perfect for it." I opened the folder. The salary listed made my eyes water. It was 3 times what I was making now. Enough to actually save money. Enough to give Zara opportunities. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "Say yes," Mr. Chin said. "You've proven yourself here, Natasha. You're meticulous, honest, and you understand how fraud works from the inside. That's valuable. Very valuable." I thought about my father. About how he'd built Coleman Investments on honesty and integrity. About how Brandon had corrupted everything he'd created. What if I could help other companies avoid that fate? Help other people avoid being victimized the way I was? Yes, I said. I accept. When I told Jerome that night, he picked me up and spun me around, careful not to wake Zara, who was sleeping in her crib. I'm so proud of you, he said. You did this, Natasha. You built this from nothing. We built it, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Jerome set me down, his hands still on my waist. You could have. You're the strongest person I know. There was something in his eyes. Something warm and tender. Something that had been growing between us for months but neither of us had named. Jerome, I said softly. Natasha, He stopped, seeming to wrestle with words. I need to tell you something. And if it's too soon, if you're not ready, just tell me and we'll never talk about it again. My heart was pounding. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. Maybe I already have. I know it's complicated. I know you've been through hell with Brandon. I know you might never be ready for another relationship. But I needed you to know. You and Zara, you're my family. And I love you both. I looked at this man who'd saved my life. Who'd given me shelter when I had nowhere to go. Who'd held my hand through labor and changed diapers at 3 a.m. and studied beside me in the library. Who'd never asked for anything in return. And I realized I'd been falling in love with him too. Not the desperate, needy love I'd felt for Brandon. Not the kind of love that demanded grand gestures and expensive gifts. But something quieter. Deeper. The kind of love that showed up every day. That stayed when things got hard. I love you too, I said. I think I have for a while now. I was just scared to admit it. Jerome's smile was brilliant. Yeah. I stepped closer to him. You're the best man I've ever known, Jerome. And I'd be honored if you wanted to, if we could. Be together, he finished. Like really together? Not just roommates raising a baby? Yeah, I said laughing. Like that. He kissed me then, gentle and sweet. It felt like coming home. Like finding something I didn't know I'd been searching for. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. I want to do this right, he said. Take you on dates. Court you properly. Not just because we ended up living together. Jerome, we're raising a baby together. I think we're past the traditional dating stage. Doesn't matter. He smiled. You deserve romance. You deserve to be treated like you're special. I am special, I said. Because you make me feel that way every single day. We told Zara the next morning, even though she was too young to understand. Your mama and I are together now, Jerome said, holding her tiny hand. I'm going to take care of both of you for as long as you'll let me. Zara blew a spit bubble in response. We took it as approval. Life settled into a new rhythm after that. Jerome and I were partners in every sense. Raising Zara together, building our careers, supporting each other's dreams. He excelled in his accounting classes. I built the forensic division at my firm into something respected. We heard through news reports that Brandon's case was moving forward. More charges had been added. The prosecutors had found evidence of fraud going back 7 years. Dozens of victims. Over $50 million stolen. Courtney had disappeared from the public eye after filing for divorce. Rumors said she'd moved back to her hometown, humiliated and broke. I felt nothing for either of them. No anger, no satisfaction, nothing. They were part of a past life that felt more like a bad dream than reality. My reality was Jerome making pancakes on Sunday mornings. Zara's first word, Dada, looking right at Jerome. Saving enough money to buy decent furniture instead of thrift store finds. Building something real and lasting. 6 months after I'd started my new position, Mr. Chen called me into his office again. Natasha, I have a proposition for you, he said. The firm is doing well largely because of your division. We're getting more forensic cases than we can handle. I want to expand. And I want you to be a partner. A partner? I repeated, stunned. You'd have equity in the firm. A percentage of profits. And more importantly, you'd have a say in how we run things. He slid another folder across the desk. Think about it. I looked at the numbers. Partner. Equity. A real stake in something I was building. My father had been a partner in his own firm before building Coleman Investments. He taught me that ownership mattered. That having skin in the game meant you'd fight to do things right. I don't need to think about it, I said. Yes. Absolutely yes. That night, Jerome and I celebrated with cheap champagne and Chinese takeout. Zara sat in her high chair making a mess with rice. A partner, Jerome said, shaking his head in amazement. 2 years ago you had nothing. Now look at you. Look at us, I corrected. You're on the dean's list. You got that scholarship. You're going to graduate in another year. And then I'm going to work for you, Jerome said, grinning. If you'll hire me. You sure you want to work for your girlfriend? I teased. Jerome's expression turned serious. Actually, I was hoping you'd be my wife by then. I froze, chopsticks halfway to my mouth. What? I'm not proposing right now, Jerome said quickly. I want to do it right. But Natasha, I'm going to propose. When the time is right. When I have a ring and a plan and I can give you the moment you deserve. I just wanted you to know it's coming. Tears filled my eyes. Jerome. You don't have to answer now, he said. I just wanted you to know where my heart is. Where it's been for a long time now. I set down my chopsticks and moved to sit in his lap. My answer is going to be yes, I said. Whenever you ask, however you ask. It's yes. He held me close, his face buried in my hair. I love you, Natasha. I love you too. Zara chose that moment to throw rice in our direction, making us both laugh. We cleaned her up together, this family we'd built from ashes and kindness. Brandon's trial was approaching. I'd have to testify. Have to face him again. But I wasn't the same woman he'd thrown out onto the street. I wasn't broken or desperate or afraid. I was strong. I was successful. I was loved. And that made all the difference. The trial started on a Monday in October. I walked into the federal courthouse wearing a professional Navy suit Jerome had helped me pick out. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun. I looked every inch the successful forensic accountant I'd become. Brandon was already at the defense table when I entered the courtroom. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. The expensive suit he wore couldn't hide the exhaustion in his face, the fear in his eyes. When he saw me, his expression twisted with hatred. I met his gaze calmly, then looked away. He wasn't worth my energy anymore. The prosecution had 23 witnesses lined up. I was number 7. For 6 days, I sat in the gallery and listened to testimony about Brandon's crimes. Financial analysts explained the complex fraud schemes. FBI agents detailed the evidence they'd found. Victims took the stand, describing how they'd lost their life savings to his lies. An elderly couple, the Johnsons, broke down in tears describing how they'd invested their retirement with Coleman Investments. How Brandon had promised them safe, steady returns. How they'd lost everything and now Mrs. Johnson was working as a cashier at 72 years old. I watched Brandon throughout their testimony. He showed no remorse. No guilt. Just calculation, like he was trying to figure out how to spin this in his favor. On the 7th day I was called to testify. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Miss Patterson, smiled encouragingly as I took the stand. After I was sworn in, she began with easy questions. My name, my background, how I'd met Brandon. Then she got to the heart of it. Ms. Lawson, she said, using my maiden name, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? We were married for 5 years, I said clearly. I thought we had a good marriage. I trusted him completely. And your father, Robert Lawson. He owned Coleman Investments before his death? Yes. My father built that company over 30 years. It was his legacy. What happened to Coleman Investments after your father passed away? I took a breath. I inherited everything, the company, his investments, his properties. Brandon suggested we consolidate our assets for tax purposes. He was my husband. I trusted him. So I signed papers transferring everything to his name. Can you describe the circumstances under which you signed those documents? I was 6 months pregnant at the time. I had severe morning sickness. I could barely keep food down and I was exhausted all the time. I paused. Brandon would bring me documents when I was lying in bed, too sick to read them properly. He'd say they were just routine paperwork. Refinancing, consolidation, nothing to worry about. I signed because I trusted him. Did you ever suspect he was defrauding you? Not until he threw me out of our home. Miss Patterson paused to let that sink in. Can you tell the court what happened that night? I described it all. The cold marble floor. The blood. Being thrown onto the street while pregnant. Collapsing on the sidewalk. How Jerome had found me and saved my life. Several jurors were visibly upset. One woman was wiping her eyes. And after you recovered from that ordeal, what did you do? Miss Patterson asked. I started investigating. I wanted to understand what had happened. How I'd lost everything. I looked directly at the jury. That's when I discovered the Highland Project fraud. The missing $25 million. The fake investors, the shell companies, the offshore accounts. All of it in my father's company. Using my father's good name to steal from innocent people. What did you do with that information? I sent it to the SEC and the FBI. Anonymously at first because I was afraid. But eventually I came forward. Because what Brandon was doing was wrong. And because I owed it to my father's memory to stop it. Thank you, Ms. Lawson. Brandon's lawyer, a slick man named Thornton, stood for cross-examination. Ms. Lawson, you claim you were unaware of these financial transactions. But you signed every document, didn't you? Yes, I admitted. And you benefited from the lifestyle these allegedly fraudulent funds provided. The mansion, the cars, the luxury shopping? I thought that money came from legitimate business, I said calmly. I didn't know my husband was stealing it. But you lived quite well off these alleged crimes, didn't you? Thornton pressed. I lived as the wife of a man I thought was successful. When I discovered he was actually a thief, I left, or rather, he threw me out. Isn't it true that you're testifying today out of revenge? That you're angry about your divorce and trying to punish Mr. Coleman? We're not divorced, I said. Brandon never filed papers. He just threw me away like garbage and moved his mistress into our home. I paused. And I'm not testifying for revenge. I'm testifying for justice. There are dozens of people who lost everything because of his fraud. They deserve to have their day in court. But you stand to gain from Mr. Coleman's conviction, don't you? If his assets are seized, you might recoup some of your inheritance. I don't want anything that he touched, I said firmly. I've built a new life. A better life. I don't need his stolen money. Thornton tried a few more angles, but I stayed calm and consistent. When he finally dismissed me, I walked past Brandon's table with my head high. The trial continued for another 3 weeks. Expert witnesses dissected Brandon's fraud schemes. More victims testified. The evidence was overwhelming. Through it all, Brandon maintained his innocence. He claimed he'd been set up. That employees had betrayed him. That I had manipulated the records out of spite. No one believed him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. I was at work when I got the call from Agent Rodriguez. It's over, she said. He's been convicted. Sentencing is in 6 weeks, but the prosecutor is recommending 15 years. I sat down at my desk, phone still to my ear. 15 years. Could be more. The judge isn't pleased with his lack of remorse. Agent Rodriguez paused. How are you doing? I'm okay, I said. And I meant it. Thank you. For everything. After I hung up, I called Jerome. He picked up on the first ring. Guilty, I said simply. All counts. I'm coming to get you, Jerome said. We're celebrating tonight. But when I got home, Jerome wasn't alone. Agent Rodriguez was there, along with another FBI agent. What's wrong? I asked immediately. Nothing's wrong, Agent Rodriguez assured me. We just have news. Good news. The other agent stepped forward. Ms. Lawson, I'm Agent Morrison. We've been working on asset recovery for the Coleman case. Okay, I said slowly. The thing is, while most of Brandon Coleman's assets were proceeds from fraud and will be distributed to victims, there are some assets that were legitimately yours. Your inheritance from your father, which Coleman fraudulently transferred to himself. My heart started beating faster. What are you saying? We've identified approximately $8 million in assets that were directly traceable to your father's original estate. Investments that were yours before you married Coleman. The court has ruled that those assets should be returned to you. I sank onto the couch. $8 million? It's not everything, Agent Morrison said. Coleman spent a lot. But it's a significant portion of your original inheritance. It's yours, Ms. Lawson. Legally and rightfully yours. After the agents left, I just sat there, stunned. Jerome sat beside me holding Zara. $8 million, I whispered. I could buy a house. Put Zara through college. Never worry about money again. What are you going to do with it? Jerome asked quietly. I thought about my father. About the values he'd taught me. About using money to build things, to help people, to make a difference. I'm going to start a foundation, I said slowly, to help fraud victims. People like the Johnsons who lost everything. And women who are escaping abusive marriages. Women who need a safe place to go when they have nothing. Jerome's eyes were bright with emotion. Your father would be proud. I'm also going to pay you back, I said firmly. Every penny you spent on me. The hospital bills, the food, everything. Natasha, no. Jerome, yes. You saved my life. You gave everything you had to help a stranger. Let me do this. I paused. And then let me invest in your future. College tuition fully paid. A car that actually starts in the morning. Whatever you need. I don't want your money, Jerome said. I know. That's why I want you to have it. I took his hand. Let me help you the way you helped me. Let me be your partner in every way. Jerome looked at me for a long moment. Then he smiled. Okay. But only because it would make you happy. That night, after Zara was asleep, Jerome and I sat on our small balcony overlooking the city. I thought about where I'd been 2 years ago. Bleeding on a sidewalk, pregnant and alone, with nothing but the clothes on my back. And now I had everything that mattered. A daughter I loved. A career I'd built myself. A foundation I was going to create. And a man who'd shown me what real love looked like. Brandon's sentencing is in 6 weeks, I said. Are you going to be there? Jerome asked. I thought about it. Did I need to see him sentenced? Did I need that closure? No, I decided. I don't need to see him again. He's not part of my life anymore. He's just over. Good, Jerome said, pulling me close. Because I want to focus on the future. Our future. 6 weeks later, Brandon Coleman was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. I read about it in the news. Thornton had argued for leniency, but the judge had been harsh, citing Brandon's complete lack of remorse and the devastating impact on his victims. I felt nothing when I read the article. No satisfaction, no vindication, no anger. Just a quiet sense that justice had been served. Courtney had testified against Brandon in exchange for immunity, admitting she'd known about some of his schemes. She'd left the state humiliated and broke. The mansion was sold, the proceeds going to victim restitution. Brandon's cars, his art collection, his expensive watches, all auctioned off. Coleman Investments was dissolved. My father's good name was finally free from Brandon's taint. And I moved forward, building the life I'd always deserved. 3 years had passed since that freezing December night when I'd thought my life was ending. I stood in the lobby of the Lawson Foundation looking at the brass plaque on the wall. Founded by Natasha Lawson in memory of Robert Lawson. Supporting fraud victims and women in crisis. The foundation occupied the 3rd floor of a downtown building. We had 5 full-time employees, a network of volunteer lawyers and partnerships with women's shelters across the state. In 3 years, we'd helped over 200 women escape bad situations, provided legal support to fraud victims, and recovered millions in stolen assets. I'd also built my forensic accounting firm into one of the most respected in the region. Chen and Lawson Partners had 15 employees now, and we consulted on major fraud cases nationwide. I'd testified in courtrooms from New York to California, helping put away criminals like Brandon. Jerome had graduated with honors from community college and was now finishing his bachelor's degree in accounting at the State University. He worked part-time at my firm and he was brilliant at it. My staff loved him. He had a gift for making complex financial concepts accessible to everyone. And Zara, my beautiful daughter, was 3 years old now, smart and funny and completely loved. She went to a good preschool during the day and Jerome picked her up every afternoon. She called him Daddy and had since she started talking. She didn't know Brandon existed, and I intended to keep it that way for as long as possible. We'd bought a house in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Nothing extravagant, a 3-bedroom colonial with a backyard and a swing set. It was more home than the mansion had ever been. I was in my office at the foundation when my assistant buzzed. Natasha, there's a call for you. Someone named Helen Martinez? I picked up immediately. Helen, it's been a while. I know. I'm sorry I haven't stayed in touch. Helen's voice was warm. I wanted to thank you again. For giving me the chance to do the right thing. You took the risk, I said. I just provided the opening. Still. Because of you, I got promoted. I'm the CFO at my new company now. She paused. Actually, that's why I'm calling. We're doing a major internal audit and I think we might have some irregularities. Would Chin and Lawson be interested in taking the case? I smiled. Send over the details. We'd be happy to help. After I hung up, I thought about how far we'd all come. Helen had stood up to corruption and been rewarded. The victims of Brandon's fraud had received restitution. Not everything they'd lost, but enough to rebuild. And I'd turned my worst experience into a mission to help others. That evening, Jerome came home from class and found me in the kitchen making dinner. Zara was already in bed, tired from a long day at preschool. How was school? I asked as he kissed my cheek. Good. Professor Morrison wants me to consider graduate school. Said I have a real talent for forensic accounting. He grinned. Wonder where I learned that. You're a natural, I said honestly. You see patterns other people miss. Jerome pulled out his laptop. Actually, I wanted to show you something. There's a news report about Brandon. I stiffened. What about him? He's trying to appeal his sentence. Says he was wrongly convicted. Jerome pulled up the article. I skimmed it. Brandon was claiming new evidence, arguing that he'd been framed. His new lawyer was making noise about a retrial. "He's desperate," I said. "It won't work. The evidence was too solid." "I know. But I wanted you to be aware, just in case reporters start calling again." I closed the laptop. "It doesn't matter. He can appeal all he wants. The truth is the truth." "You're not worried?" "Not even a little. I meant it. He took 3 years of my life. He doesn't get another second of my peace." Jerome studied me. "You've come so far, Natasha. Sometimes I think about that night I found you, and I can't believe you're the same person." "I'm not," I said simply. "That person died on that sidewalk. This version of me was born when you showed me kindness." "I didn't do anything special," Jerome protested. "You did everything that mattered." I moved to stand in front of him. "You showed me what a good man looks like. What real love means. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." Jerome pulled a small box from his pocket. My breath caught. "I was going to wait until tomorrow," he said. "It's the anniversary of the night we met. But I can't wait anymore." He opened the box, revealing a simple but beautiful diamond ring. "Natasha Lawson, you are the strongest, smartest, most incredible woman I've ever known. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into purpose. You help people. You fight for justice. You're an amazing mother. And I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." He got down on one knee. "Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my face. "Yes. Absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on my finger and I pulled him up into a kiss. When we broke apart, we were both crying and laughing. "I love you, Jerome Washington," I said. "I love you too, soon-to-be Natasha Washington." We set the wedding for the following spring. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family in a small ceremony. The foundation staff, my colleagues from the firm, Jerome's professors and classmates. People who'd been part of our journey. Helen came and told everyone how I'd saved her career. Mr. Chin gave a speech about how I'd transformed his firm. Agent Rodriguez attended and said I was one of the bravest women she'd ever met. And Jerome's best man was his academic advisor, Professor Morrison, who told stories about Jerome's dedication and brilliance in the classroom. When Jerome and I exchanged vows, with Zara standing beside us as our flower girl, I thought about the night he'd found me. About how I'd been convinced my life was over. But it hadn't been ending. It had been beginning. I'd lost everything material. Money, property, status. But I'd gained everything that actually mattered. Purpose. Self-respect. Real love. A family I'd chosen and who'd chosen me. At the reception, someone asked about Brandon. About whether it bothered me that he was still fighting his conviction. "No," I said simply. "He made his choices. He hurt people and now he's facing the consequences. That's not my problem anymore." "But don't you want revenge?" they pressed. I looked around the room. At Jerome dancing with Zara. At the friends I'd made through the foundation. At the life I'd built from ashes. "I already got my revenge," I said. "I lived. I thrived. I built something beautiful from what he tried to destroy. That's better than any revenge I could have imagined." Later that night, Jerome and I stood on the balcony of our hotel room, looking out at the city lights. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about my father," I admitted. "About how he taught me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they do with what they've been given. I think he'd be proud of what I've built." "I know he would be." Jerome wrapped his arms around me. "And I'm proud of you too. Every single day." "I'm proud of us," I corrected. "We built this life together. All of it." The next morning, I woke to a news alert on my phone. Brandon's appeal had been denied. The conviction stood. The sentence stood. 18 years in federal prison. He'd be 65 when he got out. An old man who'd wasted his life on greed and cruelty. I deleted the notification and got up to make breakfast for my family. My husband. My daughter. My beautiful, hard-won, extraordinary life. Brandon was the past. And I had a future to build. 5 years after Jerome had found me bleeding on a sidewalk, I stood at the podium of a packed auditorium. The Lawson Foundation's annual gala was the biggest fundraiser of the year. 500 guests filled the ballroom. Business leaders, politicians, fraud victims we'd helped, women we'd supported through crisis. When my father died, I began. He left me more than money. He left me a legacy of integrity. Of doing the right thing even when it's hard. When I lost everything I thought defined me, wealth, status, security, I learned what really mattered. I paused, looking out at the crowd. We matter to each other. Our choices matter. How we treat people matters. That's what the Lawson Foundation is built on. The belief that everyone deserves a second chance. That fraud victims deserve justice. That women in crisis deserve support and dignity. I gestured to the screen behind me which showed the numbers. 300 women helped. 500 fraud cases supported. $20 million recovered for victims. Partnerships with shelters in 15 states. None of this would exist without a man who showed me kindness when I needed it most, I said. My husband, Jerome Washington, taught me that helping people isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up, doing what's right, being there when someone needs you. Jerome smiled at me from the front row, holding 8-year-old Zara's hand. Our daughter had started 3rd grade this year and she was thriving. Smart, confident, kind, everything I'd hoped she'd be. Beside them sat our son, 3-year-old Marcus. We'd chosen the name together, wanting it to mean strong and dedicated. After the gala ended and the guests had left, Jerome and I stood in the empty ballroom. Another successful year, Jerome said. He'd finished his master's degree 2 years ago and was now the CFO of Chen & Lawson Partners. He'd been instrumental in growing the firm, bringing in major clients and mentoring young accountants. We make a good team, I said, leaning against him. The best. He kissed the top of my head. Did you see the woman who came up to you after your speech? The one crying? Mrs. Johnson, I said softly. She wanted to thank me again. Said the restitution we helped her get meant she could finally retire properly. Your father would be so proud of you, Natasha. I hope so. We drove home to our house. We'd upgraded 2 years ago to a larger place as our family grew. It was beautiful but not ostentatious. Comfortable. Filled with laughter and love and the chaos of 2 young children. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in my home office and opened my computer. There was an email from Agent Rodriguez. Natasha, thought you'd want to know. Brandon Coleman was denied parole today. His earliest release date is now 2040. Hope you're doing well. I looked at the date. 2040? Brandon would be 71 years old. He'd spend the best years of his life in prison. I should have felt triumphant, victorious, but I just felt nothing. He was a stranger now. Someone who'd existed in a different lifetime. I closed the email and opened a new document instead. I'd been asked to write an article for a business journal about identifying corporate fraud. Real, practical work that helped people. My phone buzzed. A message from my assistant at the foundation. 3 new intake requests today. 2 fraud victims, 1 woman escaping domestic violence. All asking for you specifically. They've heard about your story. I replied, schedule them for this week. I'll make time. Because that's what mattered now. Helping people who were where I'd been. Scared. Lost. Convinced their lives were over. I could show them what I'd learned. That rock bottom isn't the end. It's just the foundation for something new. Something better. Another message came in, this one from Helen Martinez. Dinner next week? I want to introduce you to my niece. She's thinking about studying forensic accounting. Absolutely, I replied. Let's inspire the next generation. Jerome appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. Working late. Just finishing up. I closed my laptop. How are the kids? Zara insisted on one more story. Marcus wanted his favorite stuffed elephant. He smiled. They're both out now. We sat together on the couch in my office, sipping tea and enjoying the quiet. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Jerome asked. Sometimes, I admitted. If you hadn't found me that night. If I'd given up. But you didn't. Jerome took my hand. You fought. You survived. You built this incredible life. We built it, I corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. We were meant to find each other, Jerome said simply. That night wasn't just you needing me. It was me needing you too. I was just existing before you and Zara came into my life. Now I'm living. I kissed him, grateful for the 1000th time that he'd been working the night shift that December night. That he'd gone outside for a break. That he'd chosen to help a stranger instead of walking away. The next morning my phone rang early. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Natasha Coleman? A man's voice, official. Lawson, I corrected. Natasha Lawson. I use my maiden name now. This is the Federal Bureau of Prisons. We have a message request from inmate Brandon Coleman. He's asking to speak with you. My stomach clenched. What does he want? He says he wants to apologize. To make amends. I was quiet for a long moment. Brandon. Wanting to apologize. After all these years. Tell him no, I said firmly. I don't want to hear from him. Not now, not ever. Are you sure? He seemed quite insistent. I'm sure. I paused. He took enough from me. He doesn't get my forgiveness too. I hung up and blocked the number. Jerome found me in the kitchen a few minutes later. You okay? You look upset. Brandon tried to contact me from prison. Wants to apologize. Jerome's jaw tightened. What did you say? No. I don't need his apology. I don't need his regret. I'm done with him. I looked at my husband. I've built a beautiful life without him. With you. That's all that matters. Good, Jerome said, pulling me into a hug. He doesn't deserve another moment of your time. That evening, I had a session with one of the foundation's new clients. A woman named Patricia who'd lost her life savings to an investment scam. I feel so stupid, she said, wiping tears. I should have seen the red flags. You're not stupid, I said gently. You trusted someone who manipulated you. That's not your fault. And you're going to recover from this. I did, and so will you. But you had resources. I had nothing, I interrupted. When I started over, I was 6 months pregnant, homeless, and had $0 to my name. Less than zero. I had debt. But I had help. And now I'm here to help you. Patricia looked at me with new hope. You really think I can rebuild? I know you can. Because I did it. And I'm going to support you every step of the way. When she left, looking stronger than when she'd arrived, I felt that familiar sense of purpose. This was why I'd survived. To help others survive too. That weekend we had a family picnic in the park. Zara ran around with other kids while Marcus chased butterflies. Jerome and I sat on a blanket watching our children play. Can you believe this is our life? I asked. Every day, Jerome said. Every single day I wake up grateful. Me too. A shadow crossed the lawn. I looked up to see a woman approaching hesitantly. She was young, maybe 25, and looked terrified. Excuse me, she said. Are you Natasha Lawson? From the Lawson Foundation? I am, I said. I'm sorry to interrupt your family time. But I needed to thank you. Tears filled her eyes. 2 years ago, my husband emptied our bank accounts and left me with nothing. I was pregnant and scared. The foundation helped me. You helped me. And now I have a job, an apartment, and my daughter has everything she needs. She showed me a photo on her phone. A beautiful little girl, maybe 2 years old. She's gorgeous, I said sincerely. Her name is Hope. Because that's what you gave me. The woman wiped her eyes. I just wanted to say thank you. For showing me that surviving is possible. After she left, I looked at Jerome. He was smiling, his eyes bright. That's your legacy, he said. Not the money, not the foundation building. It's the lives you've changed. The hope you've given people. Our legacy, I corrected. Everything I've done, you've been right there beside me. As the sun set and we packed up our picnic, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The pain, the loss, the struggle. And I realized something profound. I wouldn't change any of it. If I hadn't lost everything, I never would have found what really mattered. I never would have met Jerome. Never would have built the foundation. Never would have understood that the best revenge isn't destroying someone who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful, so meaningful, that they become irrelevant. Brandon was in prison, bitter and broken. And I was here, surrounded by love, doing work that mattered, helping people who needed it. That was victory. That was justice. That was everything. 10 years after that frozen December night, I received a letter. It was from Courtney, Brandon's former mistress. She'd heard about the foundation. She'd lost everything too, her reputation, her friends, her future. She was working as a waitress and struggling. I'm sorry, she wrote. For everything. I was young and stupid. I thought Brandon's money would make me happy. I was wrong. I destroyed lives, including my own. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did. And I'm sorry. I read the letter twice. Then I wrote back. Courtney, I appreciate your apology. I won't pretend what you did was okay, it wasn't. But I'm not holding on to anger anymore. It doesn't serve me. If you're serious about changing, if you want to do better, reach out to the foundation. We help women rebuild their lives. All women. Even ones who've made terrible mistakes. Everyone deserves a chance to do better. Natasha. I sent the letter and felt lighter. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me. About refusing to carry bitterness anymore. Jerome found me burning Brandon's old threatening messages in our backyard fire pit that evening. Spring cleaning? He asked. Something like that, I said, watching the papers turn to ash. Getting rid of the last pieces of the past. Good, Jerome said. Because the future is looking pretty amazing. He was right. Our foundation had helped over 1,000 people now. My firm was thriving. Our children were healthy and happy. We had a home filled with love. And somewhere, in a federal prison, Brandon Coleman was serving his sentence. Alone. Without the wealth he'd sold his soul for. Without the woman he'd betrayed me for. Without anything that mattered. While I had everything. Not the mansion or the luxury cars. But the things that were real. Love. Purpose. Family. Community. The knowledge that I'd taken my worst day and turned it into a mission to help others through theirs. As Jerome and I stood together watching the papers burn, our children playing in the yard behind us, I finally understood what my father had tried to teach me all those years ago. Success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives touched. In kindness shown. In choosing every day to do the right thing even when it's hard. Brandon had chosen money over morals. Greed over goodness. Power over people. And he'd lost everything that mattered. I'd chosen differently. I'd chosen to fight. To rebuild. To help. To love. And I'd gained everything worth having. The fire turned the last of Brandon's threats to ash and I smiled. This was the life I deserved. The one I'd built from nothing. The one that was real and true and beautiful. And no one could ever take it from me again.